questions and your thoughts after Harold has spoken. So we are now at the time we are due to start, so we will get started. And welcome to everybody who's also watching us on other channels like Facebook. It's a pleasure to be here. It's my pleasure to formally welcome you all to the first of our lecture series with the Institute of Tourism. And I'd like to thank Reza Sultana, who's also on this call, for the opportunity to speak to you all today. I'm the chair of the International Centre for Responsible Tourism Global, and we're a non-profit that supports change makers around the world. The social entrepreneur, Bill Drayton, once said, "If everyone is a change maker, there's no way a problem can outrun a solution." And our job is to help you as change makers make tourism better and to share solutions so that we outrun those problems that we're facing. We advocate the principle of taking responsibility to make tourism more sustainable, to make it better places for people to live in and visit. And the order of those final words is important to put residents at the heart of the tourism strategy before visitors. And it's a message which our founder, Emeritus Professor Harold Goodwin, has been raising since the Cape Town Declaration on Responsible Tourism in 2002. So it's my great pleasure to introduce Harold, who will say a few words before we start the lecture. Harold.
Thanks, Debbie. It's a real privilege to be on this call with you this morning. I'm always keen to spread the concept of responsibility, and I'll explain why, I think, during the lecture, which you're shortly going to hear, and I understand it will be available for you to download and watch later. But Reza, thank you very much for the opportunity. I'm looking forward to it, and to your questions afterwards.
Yes, we will be unmuting you just for people who've joined later. We will be unmuting you after the presentation. So enjoy the presentation.
I was delighted when the Institute of Tourism asked me to prepare an introductory lecture on the principles of responsible tourism, and thank you for either signing up to listen today, or if you're watching in the future, thanks for finding this. I hope you'll find it interesting as a way of beginning to think about why responsibility is at the heart of making tourism more sustainable. So what I'm going to talk about today is responsible tourism. We're going to start by looking at the principles, because that's perhaps the best way to understand what the ICRT Global is about, and also to understand how our courses may be able to assist you in your career and in making change in the way tourism impacts on local communities and their environments around the world. I would argue that responsible tourism is fundamentally good for business, good for local communities, good for the preservation and conservation of their culture and of the wildlife and natural environment in which they lead their lives. Now, if we look back on the history of sustainable development, it's had a long history. In 1972, when I was a mere student at university in York, the World Commission on Environment and Development published its first global report looking at the implications of change, social and economic development, and climate change on the world as we would know it. I remember back in 1972 thinking all of those impacts are going to be a long way off. The world looks very different now. Climate change is upon us. I'm recording this in the UK. We're having a series of the hottest days on record, and last night in my office, the temperature, despite the fan overhead and all the windows being open, hit 28.9 degrees. It's uncomfortable, and it's going to get worse. The reason I wanted to show you this slide, is to show you just how long we've been at this, and the fact that we have very little to show for it. In fact, I've heard sustainability used to mean nothing more and we still expect to be able to do this next year. The problem with sustainability is it lacks a precise definition, and therefore people cannot be held to account for failing to be sustainable. I put this slide together to explain how responsible tourism really emerged. And as you can see, I'm crediting Jos Krippendorf and his book on the holidaymakers in 1987 for really having originated the idea of responsible tourism. Now, he was coming at it from a very different perspective. He was looking at it in terms of the damage that tourism had done to Swiss mountain pastures, particularly ski tourism, but also recognizing Maslow's hierarchy of need and the way in which, as human beings became more prosperous, they looked more for self-actualization. He effectively foresaw the growth of the experience economy, which has done so much to underpin the growth of responsible tourism. I've subsequently published Taking Responsibility for Tourism, and then more recently in 2016, Responsible Tourism, published by Goodwin. Neither book has had much impact, to be honest, but if you want to find the full range of my thinking about this, get hold of a copy of the Responsible Tourism, the second book I wrote. In 2004, we were able to launch Responsible Tourism Awards, and in 2024, a couple of decades later, with Debbie Hindle, we launched ICRT Global. And the idea of ICRT Global is simply to bring together all those people around the world who are trying to make tourism better, the change makers, if you like, in order that they could interact with each other, learn from each other, and increase our knowledge of what works and what doesn't. Now, across the bottom of the slide, you can see the government policy response to this. It really starts with, in terms of government, with the 1996 white paper, immediately at the end of apartheid, when South Africa was thinking about how it could use tourism to make a new society, and they published a white paper on the development and promotion of tourism in South Africa. And that talked explicitly about responsible tourism and had obviously been informed by Krippendorf's work. At the same time, I have been working with Voluntary Service Overseas on a campaign to try to get ethical tourism to take off in the UK, and they funded me to do some research with the Association of Independent Tour Operators. We quickly discovered that whilst those independent tour operators were doing a lot in destinations to make tourism more responsible, they were unlikely to sign up to the idea of ethical tourism. And the reason for that is that to claim to be ethical is to claim to have a limitless agenda for action. It'd be very hard to run a tour operation out of the UK if you didn't feature any restaurants where meat was served. And yet a person committed to that particular ethics of veganism might be very unwilling to book with you and would certainly challenge you for claiming to be ethical if you even took people to restaurants where meat was being cooked and consumed. So that work with VSO and the work in South Africa led to the 2002 Cape Town Declaration on Responsible Tourism in Destinations, which took place alongside the World Summit on Sustainable Development, which that year was in Johannesburg. And that was really the foundation of the responsible tourism movement, founded really on the ideas of Krippendorf, the experience of working with ATO, the experiment with ethical tourism, and then beginning to work more widely with the industry and saying, look, what can you take responsibility for? What can you do to make tourism better? And the first document was the Cape Town Declaration, which I'll quote from a bit shortly. It's a very long declaration. Every line of it was taken through the conference in Cape Town in 2008. 20 years later, 2 decades on, with a lot more experience and having run the Responsible Tourism Awards for nearly 2 decades, we rewrote the declaration into the Charter, which was signed on Magna Carta Island in London in 2022, a much briefer enunciation of the principles of responsible tourism. Both documents still important, I think, in understanding what responsible tourism is. So the Cape Town Declaration, as it became known, recognised that responsible tourism takes many different forms. Different destinations, different stakeholders will inevitably have different priorities. If you're a mountain resort, your priorities are different to what they might be if you're on the Mediterranean coast. Local policies and guidelines need to be developed through multi-stakeholder processes to enable all the different voices in a destination to be heard. And we called on countries, multilateral agencies, destinations, enterprises to develop practical guidelines which would enable tourism to be used to create better places for people to live in and for people to visit. And you'll note there the emphasis upon creating better places for people to live, because great places to live are undoubtedly great places to visit. And it's really important to get it that way around. It's a real litmus test of whether people have understood the basic principle of responsible tourism. If they talk about creating great places to visit first, you know they haven't really understood. So this is the original Declaration on Responsible Tourism from the Cape Town Declaration in 2002. It's about minimising negative economic, environmental and social impact. It's the triple bottom line, if you like. Creating greater economic benefits for local people and enhancing their well-being, improving working conditions, and for small entrepreneurs, better access to the industry. It is critically about involving local people in decisions that affect their lives and life chances. And of all the elements of the responsible tourism movement, that's the one where we're probably making the slowest progress. On the other hand, where we've made the most rapid progress, in Kerala and Barcelona, we've seen the biggest developments in responsible tourism. Fourthly, it's about making a positive contribution to the conservation of natural and cultural heritage to help maintain, if you like, the world's diversity. Providing more enjoyable experiences for tourists by creating meaningful connections with local people and giving them a much better understanding, a deeper and greater understanding of the local cultural, social and environmental issues. Then the one I'm really embarrassed by, which is this rather clumsily worded, providing access for physically challenged people. We now use the language of, which is common in India, of enabling the differently abled to participate in tourism, both in terms of working in it and benefiting from it as a leisure activity as tourists themselves. I much prefer that language. My defence is that I had to create that line, being asked to put something into these principles on the hoof, as it were, in front of the 280 people in the audience, and that was the best I could come up with on the spot. In my defence, nobody queried what I'd written or asked for anything better. So it is what it is, but I'm glad to have moved on from it in the Charter. And then finally, that tourism should be culturally sensitive and engender respect between tourists and hosts, and to build local pride and confidence. Now, much tourism does do this, but it only does it when people take responsibility and make it happen. It doesn't just automatically happen. So why the word responsible? One of the most interesting things about responsible is that most of us have 2 intensive periods of education about what it means. The first is when as children we are in conflict with our parents and our teachers about whether a particular piece of our behaviour was responsible or not. And then, of course, 20, 25 years later, we may well go through the same thing again as parents or teachers with young children who, again, are testing out what we mean by responsible. So of all the kind of abstract concepts that we use, it's probably used more often than any other except love. And it is equally difficult to define what it means in practice. But in all cultures, we find that it has 2 different sets of meanings. The balance between them varies from one place to another. But it has 2 fundamental meanings. The first is where responsibility is placed upon us, perhaps because of the job we are employed to do, where we're held accountable for the actions and consequences of we as individuals or as legal entities like companies. We're held accountable and legally liable for what we do. That's, if you like, the less attractive version of accountability. It can be very real. Too often, I think it's escaped by people who behave in irresponsible ways, but walk away having done significant damage, but without any penalty. But that is something which you subscribe to when you take a particular job or a particular role in an organisation. And then there's the other meaning of the word, which is, if you like, the respondability, which is where individuals and organisations step up and take responsibility to make a difference. And this is the form of responsibility that the responsible tourism movement is largely based upon. It's about that idea that if you can make something better, if you can use your business to make something better, why wouldn't you do that? Through partnerships, through relationships, through learning from practice, and by critical reflection on what you do. So the fundamental political question, which works really well with politicians, if you're discussing this with them, is, are you going to use tourism, or is your community, your constituency, your place going to be used by it? And if you don't manage it, you will for sure end up being used by it. Now, in the course on responsible tourism that I wrote, in which we run through the ICRT Global, there's a lot of discussion of what responsibility means in practice. What I would say is that at the heart of it is the notion of partnership, that a business, an individual, works with others in partnership to make a change. You don't just impose the price on others, you work in partnership to make the change. In the jargon, you've both got skin in the game. You both, to make it work, have got to contribute, and you both suffer if it doesn't work. It has to be based on a degree of equality, of a sharing relationship which is mutually beneficial. It requires a high level of collaboration, which needs to be negotiated, and there need to be agreed objectives. There has to be mutual respect between the parties. There has to be leadership in the community. There has to be transparency, and there has to be honesty. But if you put those principles into practice and work with others in the destination to address the issues which matter there, you're very likely to be successful both commercially and in terms of making the change that you sought to see when you set out to take responsibility. The best book on what responsibility means is Edith Sisu's Responsibility in Cultures of the World. And if you want to understand more about the way responsibility is used in different cultures, I'd commend that particular book to you. It is still in print, but it's not easy to get hold of. The Lincoln quote is, I think, particularly important today in the context of climate change as we face it, which is that you cannot escape the responsibility of tomorrow by evading it today. It's never been more true than it is now in the context of climate change. Responsibility is about understanding and promoting ethical values common to humanity, with an attitude of tolerance and respect for the diversity of religious, philosophical and moral beliefs. I've phrased responsible tourism very much in the context of a secular tradition, but it equally well works within religious traditions, in all of which responsibility plays a significant part. That particular quote comes from the UNWTO Global Code of Ethics, which they published in 1999. Still available on their website. So why step up and take responsibility? It's about secular ethics, so it's about defining right and wrong based on human reason, empathy, logic, shared experience, and also often on religious principles. But they won't necessarily be the same between one society and another. And it's about emphasizing, promoting human well-being, social harmony, and ethical living, rather in the sense of the African word widely used across southern Africa of Ubuntu, which basically I am because you are. Recognition of our common humanity, our common relationship with each other, and that we define ourselves by our relationships with other people. So responsible tourism is about taking responsibility for achieving sustainable development through tourism. It's about what you do individually and collectively And it logically follows from that that it's a responsibility both of the individual tourist and individuals working in the tourism industry. It takes both to make responsibility work at the local level, and we talk a lot about that in the course. So one of the ways of understanding responsible tourism with a secular ethics framework is to say that if one has the knowledge and the agency, the opportunity and the capacity to act, to take responsibility, then surely one should. There's an arguable ethical obligation. Within a discourse of responsibility, there is a stronger imperative to respond and act. If you see something going wrong and you can do something about it, why wouldn't you step in and make it better? And of course, if you've got a business behind you in doing that, then you'll have a rather bigger impact than you would just as an individual acting on your own. So if the issue and capacity to act is established, then failure to act can be attacked as irresponsible. And the opposite of responsibility is irresponsibility. That's what we accuse children of, and sometimes it's what they accuse us of, particularly perhaps around the climate agenda. But it is that discussion which precisely brings out all these discussions about the ethics of our current behaviour and how it will affect the future. You can find a lot more of that in my publication in the major work on ethical thinking and its contribution to teaching in universities. So why take responsibility? Now this is the business case, and as you'll see, it is multiple. First of all, because it's the right thing to do for this and for future generations. It's surely the right thing to minimise our negative impacts and maximise our positive ones. It ensures that you have regulatory compliance. That's the kind of lowest level. There's reduced risk and you get licence to operate if you maintain good relationships with your neighbours and create a safer and richer destination experience for your guests. There are cost savings from reduced consumption and lower transport costs when we source locally, and it'll be fresher. Improved product quality with local guides, craft products, local produce. Staff morale and commitment with lower staff turnover and reduced training costs come from when your staff see the wider benefit of the business to the community, the business they work for, having positive impacts in the community from which they come and which they lead their lives. And then finally, it is important, but I don't think it's the only reason, the market advantage from a better product, PR and differentiation in the marketplace. Having said all this, I think it really is important for me to say that no business can do everything. We have to choose. We have to choose to do what we can. And we do it for reasons of enlightened self-interest and recognizing that no man is an island. We have to live with the other people with whom we come into contact through our business lives and through living in society with others. No man is an island, to quote the poet. So the ICRT Global, which runs these professional development courses, is committed to South-South Exchange. We're about sharing examples of really good practice, and my colleague Debbie Hindle identified the similarity we have with Isaac Newton's famous phrase when he said in 1675, "If I see further, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants. If I see further, it is by standing on the giants of shoulders." And the giants of responsible tourism are those whose practice in every corner of the world has made a difference. And we identify those people through the awards. We share the collective knowledge to help us all to see further, to learn how to do more. We provide professional training of the sort which I hope this brief lecture will encourage you to think about. We provide conferences and workshops. We're into knowledge sharing. And South-South Exchange is a really important part of what we do. So we're about supporting change makers. We're a non-profit on a mission to share more knowledge and understanding of responsible tourism in order to make better places for people to live in, which are themselves better places for people to visit. Now, having said all this, there is no blueprint. There is no internationally valid prescription for how to make tourism more sustainable. The salience and importance of issues varies from place to place, affected by the cultural and natural environment, and the solutions therefore vary too. But it is quite clear that you can learn from the experience of others and adapt other people's solutions to problems and make them work in your own place. And when you're aware of what others have done, it's a hell of a lot easier than starting from nowhere. Better to start on the shoulders of others than to try to start knowing nothing and to make a change. We know lots of things now that don't work. Those are important to share as well as the things that do. But fundamentally, what we're asking people who commit to responsible tourism to do is to make tourism better, to make it more sustainable. To do that, we all have to take responsibility. So enough of the patter. It's very important when you think about this whole area to remember this phrase, never mind the patter, watch the hands. So Unit 1 of the Professional Development Masters talks about what responsible tourism is. We explore what it is, how it differs from sustainable tourism. We talk about it as a broad church and where it emerged from, and explain why the change of focus is so significant. In Unit 2, we look at where responsible tourism came from. What are the antecedents? Because that helps us to understand why it's different. And if you understand where you've come from, it's much easier to chart a course into the future. We try to answer the question why responsible tourism is gaining traction, and it clearly is, and we address what responsibility means in practice. So, sustainable tourism is an aspiration which needs to be achieved. And some of the principles are there on the slide. I won't remind you of. Unit 3 looks at the business cases. It is multiple, don't forget, it's not singular. The business cases for responsible tourism. We look at why adopting responsible tourism practices make business sense from different business perspectives, from the point of view of the CEO or the finance manager or human resources. All of those things make a difference. And we explicitly talk about the commercial benefit and how responsible tourism benefits business. Then the 4th unit looks at responsible tourism from a destination perspective. After all, we all take our holidays in other people's homes. We travel away to stay overnight in order to have a holiday generally. And in doing that, we're moving into somebody else's home and using it, despite the fact that we've contributed nothing to make the place what it is. So we ask here how the principles of responsible tourism can be applied in destinations, and how local authorities working with communities can use the principles of responsible tourism to develop sustainable tourism and to use tourism rather than to be used by it. Why choose the ICRT Global? Well, because of the range of students we've now had, the transformative learning which reshapes how you will understand tourism, the practical tools, which the course has many of, expert guidance from leaders, not just the staff in the ICRT Global, but all of our former students. Real-world examples drawn from destination and businesses worldwide, and every year that knowledge is renewed through the Responsible Tourism Awards. It's a supportive and international learning community. And our training is designed not just to inform, but to change how people think and help them take responsibility for the issues that matter most. So Unit 5 then takes us from theory to practice. We looked at some concrete examples of what people have done to make tourism better and won Responsible Tourism Awards for very often. So we look at how you can make a difference, how you can apply the ideas to make tourism better. We ask you how you want to make a difference and how you want to make tourism better. And then your certification turns on an action plan, often a very short 2 sides of A4 action plan of what you've learned from the course and how you think you can apply it. And for an additional fee, if you want it, we can arrange for further feedback on your report, individual tutorial support and ongoing mentoring, but that's a matter for you when you get to that stage in the course. I hope very much that my presentation today will have intrigued you about responsible tourism and encouraged you to think about doing the course on responsible tourism. The details there, where you can load it, find it, the professional certificate in responsible tourism, 10 weeks. I'd argue it's beyond master's level. It's a serious professional development course. Find then the charter from 2022 and the Cape Town Declaration from 2002. My own personal website and an email address, the ICRT Global, and some other places where you can find responsible tourism information freely available. I hope very much that this will have sparked your interest, and I look forward to hearing your questions. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much indeed, Harold, and thank you for all the questions as we've been running through this and comments. Harold is now available to take calls, to questions, and if you'd like to put your hand up so I can see you on the screen. And thank you very much, Joseph, for the clap, and thank you for the lovely comments from everyone. It was nice to see United Nations Environment Programme saying it was an excellent and important lecture. We appreciate that. Thank you very much. So if you can put your hand up, and the first person is Annie Rudmundra, if you can unmute.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Debbie, if I may ask something
Oh, yes.
before. So I have shared a link that because many people ask for the certificate of participation, I've shared it in the chat box. Please fill it in within today, and we will get it. And next week we will send you the certificate. I just want to say that. So please check the chat box. I have shared the link. Thank you so much. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Reza. So I think if you can unmute.
Yes, thanks. And thanks, Harold, as well, and Institute of Tourism. My question is very simple. How do you actually target and get responsible tourists? I mean, I understand there are travelers all around the world, but how do you actually pick up the responsible travelers? I'm sorry, I don't like to use the word tourists, so responsible travelers from around the world. Thank you.
If you wanted, it was quite interesting this because as some of you at least will know, and I'm pleased to recognise there's a lot of people here from my past who some of you I've not been in touch with for years. It's just really nice to see you again on this. If you ask Justin Francis why responsibletravel.com is growing as fast as it is, and it is growing fast, he says it's because somebody found a really good trip on our site and realised there was a different way they could travel. And I think that is part of the point. We are finding more and more tour operators who are focusing and offering experiences, sometimes in one country, sometimes in multiple countries. I mean, responsibletravel.com, I think, now has trips all over the world, but it means that people can go back and find those things. And I think one of the difficulties is that it isn't easy for people to have their first experience, but when they've had an experience of traveling in a different way, they want to repeat it. And in some ways, the most extraordinary example of this that I've seen is Village Ways in northern India. They're in the foothills of the Himalaya up in Uttarakhand. And there, people who traveled with them to have essentially a walking holiday, walking from village to village with a local person, they rebooked to take part in the harvest. And we've got the photographs of some of them actually working in the fields alongside the local community, harvesting the crops. So I think part of it is finding the right network of delivery out into the marketplace, and part is simply recruiting more people through personal recommendation. And we know that that's one of the most effective ways of growing a business over time. But it is frustrating that it's not easy to differentiate yourself in a crowded marketplace. Perhaps you decide you want to go to Tanzania. Well, there's a lot of different tour operators to Tanzania. How do you find the one that's going to give you that exceptional experience? Well, it will be one where the user-generated comment and the feedback is there to support the view that this is simply a better way to do it. And I think what responsibletravel.com has done is a really good example of how this can be done. But it is an effort. The other thing I'd say is if you're running a destination and you want to ask that question, then people can only buy water in plastic bottles and throw the plastic bottles in the river if they can buy those plastic bottles locally. If all of the hotels and shops decide that they'll sell water or give water away to people who bring their own container, and there won't be any plastic bottles of water, there won't be any plastic bottles in the river or in the ocean or in the village. It's your choice. I mean, at the destination level, a lot of opportunity to change the tourist behavior by what you offer. If you don't offer it, they can't buy it.
Thank you, Harold. And our next question comes from Emmanuel Frimpong. If you can unmute, Emmanuel.
Thank you so much, Debbie. And thank you for putting this together, Institute of Tourism. My question is in two ways. One, how do you partner with companies in Africa? Because gradually Africa is opening up to tourism arrivals and is increasing, the numbers are increasing. But unfortunately, we haven't paid much attention to responsible tourism. So a lot more tourists are going to flood into Africa as we promote Destination Africa. But we are not doing much as far as responsible tourism is concerned. So how do you partner with individual organizations to help people to be responsible when they visit Africa? And another leg of the question is, how can you work with tourism boards and ministries to make sure that responsible tourism becomes something that Africa puts ahead of everything, not just the numbers that are coming, but are the individuals being responsible when they come to Africa? Thank you.
This is a very difficult question for me. I know what the answer is, but I need to be really careful about how I answer it. I am passionate about Africa. It is the world's most diverse destination. It has incredible variety and so much to offer. And if I knew I had one last trip, it would certainly either be to one of the places I know well in Africa, or to a small part of India, which I also know very well. And I don't want to be particularly critical of Africa, because I don't think the situation there, in all honesty, is worse than it is everywhere else. But the fundamental problem that lies at the heart of all of this is that tourism is a massive opportunity to earn foreign currency at the national level. And at the national level, governments obviously see tourism in terms of numbers of arrivals and the revenue that comes to the country. And you can see why they've adopted that approach. First of all, they see the benefit in the national accounts. And secondly, it's very easy to count the number of international arrivals because you just do it through an immigration process at the airport. And very often that immigration form you're filling in is more for the purpose of the statistics than for anything else. So one understands why over the last 4 or 5 decades, the focus has been on increasing numbers of arrivals. When you get to the destination level, however, the problem is somewhat different, which is how do you manage the large numbers of tourists you've got? And I'm not going to name any of the places because, Emmanuel, I want to be invited back to Africa, so I don't want to fall out with anybody. But there are a lot of places now in Africa which are beginning to suffer from over-tourism. And Africa, there's no continent now without an over-tourism problem. But I can still arrive in Africa and be told I mustn't use the word over-tourism because we don't have it here. Well, I'm afraid you do. What I would say to anybody who doesn't yet have over-tourism is do our second course, which is on the problem of over-tourism, and act before you have the problem, because it's much easier to avoid it happening than it is to change it once it's happened. It's intensely difficult once you've got the problem to get rid of it. Now, you asked specifically, Emmanuel, how we work with people. Well, we have to wait to be asked, and we're a small, struggling startup with no funding. So, money's a critical part. But I think it's fair to say, Debbie, that we're always keen to respond. I'd say the first part is probably to do one of our courses, just so that we've got to know you and you've got to know us. I think an awful lot of it can be done. But the bit that breaks people's brains, and I just want to mention this. So we're often asked whether we can just, there's a problem somewhere. and again, I'm not going to use anywhere specifically because there's nowhere in the world I don't want to go back to if I get invited. But there's a problem somewhere, and they say, can you help us to understand how to sort this problem out? And I'll say, well, sure, I can work with your tourism people, but actually the solution isn't in the hands of the tourism board. The solution lies, I remember, I can say this one, I think, safely. I was asked to review EU practice in the tourism development they've been doing across the islands of the South Pacific. And I was amazed. I was the first person ever from tourism to go and meet with the local sewage works manager. Nobody from tourism had ever been to talk to the sewage works manager before, which I couldn't understand, because it seems to me one of the biggest problems about tourism is the sewage. The extra sewage which is dumped into the local environment by the tourists arriving, often in very large numbers, in often the worst time of the year to have a lot of sewage about, particularly in the summer. And I'd stand on these coral atolls watching the, sorry for the brutality of this, but watching the condoms float in and out on the tide, thinking, what on earth is going on here? You know, the pollution from the tourism is very evident, and yet nobody's been to talk to them about the issue. And that whole framework that tourism in the destination is actually managed by the whole of local government. It cannot be managed by the tourism board. Now, if you said to me where in the world has done the best work on this, I have no doubt that it's Barcelona and Dubrovnik. And in both places, it's because the city government has come behind and worked together with all the different departments of government at the local level to address it. And it's just as possible to do that in Africa. I was asked yesterday in a conversation during one of our courses, I asked the question, why is it so much better in India in terms of the management of tourism in villages than it is in large parts of Europe? And the answer is that in villages in India, you have panchayat, which are very powerful, run by people held accountable by their peers and by their friends and relatives in the village. And it's managed much better there because of the political structures that make it possible to do it, despite the fact that India too wants as many tourists as it can possibly have. But the panchayats balance that quite well in terms of the way they manage tourism. Emmanuel, I could go on for ages about this. I hope that's at least the beginnings of an answer for you.
Absolutely, Harold. Thank you so much. Thank you. I'm grateful. So I'll keep in touch.
Thank you. Do.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have some more hands raised. First, Dr. Anya I can't see your full name, but Dr. Anya Mitra, would you like to unmute?
Namaste. This is Dr. Ananya Mitra from Amity University, Kolkata, that is India.
I know your city well.
Yeah, actually we're traveling, so there is a bit of network problem. So the video, if I on the video, there is a problem. Sir, my question to you is, like, there are matrices we measure sustainable tourism. Is there any matrix that we have where we can actually measure responsible tourism, particularly for the tourists who are undertaking it, so that this particular thing, why it came to me is because particularly from looking into the point of view of the Gen Zs, the new generations, they have an obsession towards social media. So if they're undertaking a tourism and they're getting kind of a certification or ranking, something like you have a 5-star gone for that you have undertaken a sustainable, responsible tourism, that may encourage them to take up these kind of more efforts to be more responsible. So can we have anything of that sort, like where the service providers can implement it, where we can have a measurable matrix to measure the things?
The answer is no, and then yes. And let's just deal quickly with the no, because that's the boring bit. The reality is that each business has to decide what it's going to take responsibility for. And nobody can economically survive if they try to take responsibility for everything. So each business needs to decide what are the pressing issues which arise in their own business or in the communities which they impact on, so often the neighbouring communities, and also what will matter in terms of their marketplace. So that's the first thing. So what people need, though, is a way of demonstrating that they are having an impact and making a difference. So it may be if you said to me, what are the primary things that matter to you when you're thinking about where you're going to travel to be honest, top of my list are labour conditions in the place where I'm going to stay, and whether the hotel is trying to, in areas of drought, which is now an awful lot of the world, are people making a serious effort to reduce the amount of water consumption per bed night? Those would be the two things that really matter to me. For other people, it may be local sourcing of food, or it may be the authenticity of the culture, or it may be animal welfare. People have different priorities, and we need to recognise that. So having one set of standards doesn't work, and that's why I don't think certification works, because certification just says you must be good because you've got a certificate, but it contains no meaning. It doesn't tell me what's good about that place. I don't know if somebody's got a certificate, whether they've got the worst track record for water consumption in a city or the best. The certificate doesn't tell me that. But that's what I'm interested in. I'm interested in what's going to make a difference to my experience of the place. And for me, as I've said, those are my priorities. Other people will have other priorities, and that's what you would expect of us as human beings. That's what we're like. So the answer on the broad question is no, I don't think there ever will be a standard way of doing it. But on the specifics, there's many ways. And the latest one, which I'm very proud of, we've just published on a method for calculating your local economic benefit, which includes the local sourcing that you're doing, not the local purchasing, but the local sourcing. What are you purchasing from the local community, which is actually made there? So that's included the employment benefits which are going into the local community, anything you're contributing charitably or to social organizations locally, and of course the amount of tax that you're paying locally. All of that can be reported by your accountant and signed off as your local economic benefit from your business. And I think we'll see more businesses beginning to report on their impact in a more transparent way. And it doesn't make any difference to me if I know that a particular big international company's got an impact report that talks about their impact at the global level. I mean, that's nice, but I'm interested in the place I'm going to stay in. I'm interested in the local impact of the destination that I'm going to travel to. And I think we'll see a big growth in local impact reporting by businesses over the next period. I'm sorry if that's not a totally satisfactory answer, but the world isn't perfect.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
What we'll do is we'll share some of these links with Razor, so when we send out notes to everyone afterwards, the information on the links to that new metric will also be shared with everyone, so you can see what the paper says about it. Diana, over to you. Diana McIntyre.
It's been a long time since you and I spoke. How are you?
Is it my turn? Diana?
Yes, it's your turn, Diana.
Oh, nice to hear you, Harold. Very good to link again. I'm very honored to have got the Responsible Tourism Award in 2008 at World Travel Market, and had the privilege of sitting with you and talking further. We created community tourism in 1978 in Jamaica and the International Institute of Peace took it worldwide for us. So we're very happy that your inspiration guided us as well. And we would like to have you on board with our Jamaican Caribbean Home of Community Tourism program, which has been endorsed by the IPT. It's this year, and we now have certification from the Northern Caribbean University Morris Entrepreneurship Center, because we're focused on entrepreneurship for the communities. And everything you have said here, I feel so excited, because it's all what we want to make sure that happens. And you know that you have us as a partner for sure. And we will be in touch with you. Thank you very much for your inspiration, and your presentation was fantastic. Thank you.
That's very kind, Diana. I ought to be quite good. I've been doing it for a long time. What I would say, Diana, is that we are in the process of setting up an ICRT Caribbean, and you are on the list to be contacted about that. So you'll hear from us fairly shortly, I think, about that. We're in Debbie's hands on it, but it is coming fairly soon, Debbie, I think.
It is, yes. We'll definitely be in touch, Diana. Lovely to meet you. And our next person is Dora Theodora, if you'd like to unmute.
Yes, hello from
Hello.
Athens.
I thought you must be Greek with that name. Yes, it's a very Greek name.
The weather in Greece is excellent. We have an airy atmosphere, and we are like London now. So I would like to ask something. I think every destination is the mirror of the economic acceleration of the country. I think that there is a problem. If you are destination consumer driven, how you can switch to a responsible destination?
Sorry, could you just repeat that, Dora?
Oh, the question you mean?
Yeah.
Okay. How easy is for a destination to flourish under a consumer-driven model to switch to responsible tourism when you understand powerful financial interests are at stake?
Well, clearly, I mean, obviously, Dora, it's not easy. I'd be mad if I thought for a second that this was easy. It's very difficult. We have to be honest about that. On the other hand, when people see other businesses prospering by doing it, and when communities see some businesses doing it and other businesses not, then the pressure comes on for more general change. And the decisions made at the local government level, particularly in Greece at the island or city level, can make a big difference to which businesses prosper and which don't. And in the end, it comes down to the community pressure on the businesses. Now, one of the interesting questions that always arises is about the issue of seasonality, because people who work in the tourism industry, and this will be particularly true in Greece, I think, where you have quite a long season already, and by the time you get towards the end of the season, people are exhausted and looking forward to what's called the off season. And the last thing they want to do is for tourism to go year round and to have tourists there all
Yes.
the time. The notion of the destination having a holiday is really important in a lot of places. And a lot of tourism marketeers, because they don't get up and serve the breakfast, they go into their nice air-conditioned offices to do their work. They don't get that. But I do think in the end, it's about community discussion with their politicians. We're getting sound back from somewhere.
I heard some voices.
Yes, I know. What I was saying was, in the end, it comes down to what the community is able to do. And that's why at the beginning of the lecture, I talked about the importance of local people being consulted about what kind of tourism they want. And that's both the people, that's the people who live in the destination, the people who work in the tourism businesses, and obviously the tourism businesses and the other businesses in the destinations. And in any place, there is a limit to what any place can deliver. You know, if for example, we've got places, I can talk about Britain because I don't get invited to work here, interestingly. But if you look at our national parks, we have highly exploitative mining operations, particularly for open cast mining of chalk, an example, which happens in quite a lot of our national parks, which is licensed. Getting rid of those licenses would be very, very difficult now because there are people employed there, there are powerful business organizations. So much of it, and you're quite right to point to the history, so much of it turns on how early you can get in and organize politically to determine what kind of tourism you'll have and what kind of tourists you want to attract. But having said that, yeah, and let's be optimistic. In the immediate aftermath of the collapse of the Berlin Wall, which was 89, I think, from memory, a lot of places developed tourism very fast. And a lot of it was around sex and drugs and rock and roll in some parts of Europe. Because I want to work there, I'm not going to mention them. But that tradition's gone completely. They've wiped that out. They've reduced the number of hotels. They've licensed them better. They've moved the whole tourism product up market. So it is possible to do it, but it's not easy, and it does need the whole community to come together. I mean, I look at Greece, Nora, and I used to tour lead in Greece a lot. And I think Greece is a fantastic destination. But to talk about Greece is a bit like talking about Africa, in the sense that it's such a big and diverse place.
Eu também não sei se tem dinheiro.
Greece is a lot of very different destinations. And I think partly Greece doesn't really, I still think Greece has a problem in communicating how many different experiences you can have in Greece. Diversity is sometimes a problem. It is certainly is in Africa. And any big diverse destination will have that problem. And Greece is big beyond what it looks on the map, if you see what I mean. Does that make sense? That the diversity of what's there is bigger than you would think looking at a map of Greece. And partly because of the island culture. If I think about Crete, I sometimes wonder if Crete is actually in Greece. I imagine there are people in Greece who wonder about that too. I know there are Cretans who wonder why they're in Greece. But that's part of the beauty of the country, isn't it? That diversity, and it needs to be celebrated. Sorry, that's a long rambling answer to your question. I probably haven't answered it really.
We have a few more, if you don't mind. So, Mr. Jan Huizingen from Hotel School Netherlands, please.
The hotel school.
Welcome.
No, that was a compliment. Sorry, that sounded terrible. That wasn't what I meant.
Yeah.
Deixa-me ouvir até lá, porque eu tenho...
I was waiting for the feeling to it, yeah. Thank you so much, Harold and Debbie, for sharing and hosting. So indeed, the Netherlands. By the way, we have to redefine what excellent weather means nowadays. But that was just a side note. I put my question in the chat as well. You came up with a business case for responsible behavior.
Yeah.
We would also encounter, I think, many businesses and decision makers that would experience benefit from non-responsible behavior because they do not occur all the costs, etc. So I might say they're hesitant, or they're just smart business people that also have a great business case the other way around.
Yes.
How would you approach? Would you pay attention? So in the overall change process, what is your view too?
I think there's, one of the big problems about responsible tourism is there is not a generic answer to that question. I think the truth is it requires engagement. So you see quite a big difference between a business which is family owned, and it doesn't have to be family owned, but once a business is family owned, there's a sense in which what you're leaving for future generations really matters.
Yeah,
if you're a joint stock company with no family ownership and no stake in the future, and you're thinking, well, I'm going to sell all my shares and I'm not worried about the future, then it's a much more difficult conversation.
Yeah.
And then the question of regulatory compliance and all the rest of it comes in. I think to some extent there's a number of things about the hotel industry, Jan, which drive me mad. And one of them, which really frustrates me, I can get really cross about this, is that the hotel industry has a reputation for high staff turnover. And yet, many of the young people I know who've gone on to have brilliantly successful careers got their social skills from waiting on tables or serving in a bar. And the hotels, a lot of the high staff turnover comes from that. And the shame of it is that hotels don't record where they go on to when they leave the hotel. Actually, you could make quite a big case for the hotel industry doing a lot of training for other industries. So if in Dubai, for example, a woman ends up running front of house, she'll almost certainly be poached out by a finance company who will employ and pay her much more because they're going to take advantage of the social skills that she's learned from running front of house. I think to some extent, the industry is a bit of its own worst enemy in not talking about the contribution it makes to society more generally. But I think, unfortunately, that debate with, if you like, the more irresponsible board members is sometimes just a matter of shifting the balance within the board. And if you help those people who are sympathetic to make the case themselves to the other board members, sometimes that makes a difference. And the other thing I would say is I've lost count of the number of main board directors in big tour operators or hotels who've explained to me how their granddaughter made them understand how important managing waste was. Quite why it took their granddaughter to do it, I don't know. But the point is there's lots of different ways of getting to influence people. And I think we have to use all of those to help them to understand.
So we wish that they become grandparents. Yeah, sure.
Well, the thing about being a grandparent is suddenly you are confronted about the next generation in a more aggressive way.
Yeah, I see your point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when, we're just going through this terrible heat wave as you are, I think, or about to, it does make you think about what you'll bequeathing to future generations. And people who are grandparents are they're the ones talking to me about that, my friends who are grandparents. What have we done to our kids' futures? Big
Thank
question.
you.
But there is no easy answer to your question except engagement, discussion.
Yeah, we get many questions from industry, like we have to convince our the ones we report to because they need a strong business case, etc., etc. Of course, we can turn it around and start talking the values, but that's how do we manage that conversation?
Dan, if I could just be slightly controversial, critical today.
Yeah.
When I ask people how many Hilton hotels there are, how many hotels does Hilton own? Everybody thinks it's hundreds.
Well, not own a lot, under 10 maybe.
It's about 3. And part of the problem is that people see the franchise name, the managers, forgetting actually they are largely locally owned. Often by not very nice people, actually, because they're people who've made a lot of money very quickly and they buy a hotel and then it gets managed by Hilton. But, they're not as extractive. And I think there's more that the hotel schools could do to point out that hotels are not as extractive from the local economy as, for example, Airbnb is. And I think that's a debate we've not sufficiently engaged with, because Airbnb is very extractive mainly, whereas hotels are, in my view, less extractive than Airbnb, but that's not a popular position. And it's not one that most academics would endorse.
Yeah. In my research, I'm looking into what hotels can do to engage with the local community, to create real value that is important in that community. But thank you. I will not take more time from the discussion.
Dan, can I say to you, please make sure I see that research when it's published.
Yeah, sure.
Please do. That would be really valuable work.
Sure. I will share with
you. The ones you find which are good, encourage them to apply for an award.
I started with a teaching case to share it also with students to make them think. I will share with you. Yeah.
But also encourage them to think about applying for an award where you find the good examples. Yeah. Thank you.
If everyone's all right to stay on just a little bit longer, we have one other question, which is Ngongwe Makwindi. If you'd like to unmute yourself.
Yes. Thank you very much. It's Ngoni Zashe Makwindi. Yes. I sorry for taking you back to the global south and
hang on
make a follow-up of
what my brother. I'm going to interrupt you. Why are you apologizing for me taking me back to the global south? I'm delighted. Thank you. I'd much rather talk about the global south. It's much more exciting. Please go ahead with your question.
Okay.
Whereabouts are you in Africa?
I want to make a follow-up on. Sorry, there's a breakdown.
We can hear you.
I can hear you very clearly. Please go ahead.
Hello.
Hello, we can hear you.
Yes. Okay. Yes, I want to take it up from where my brother Emmanuel has left off. Yes. Yes. Responsible tourism, sustainable tourism, is quite very familiar to me because I am a teacher of tourism. I've been teaching responsible tourism, sustainable development at the university in the global south. Right. What frustrates me, just like what my brother said, that it is rarely visible. The word responsible tourism is rarely visible in Africa. Right. After teaching about responsible tourism, sustainable tourism, sustainable development, I take my students to the field, to tourism centers, which I assume that they are practicing exactly what I have been teaching. So when my students ask questions to destination managers on sustainability, on responsible tourism, they tend to struggle to answer such questions, which might reflect that probably even in the policy, there's very little about responsible tourism. There's very little about sustainable tourism. Right. So when I also go out to do my field work and to do some research, I also encounter a similar situation where I rarely come across practices which I can relate to responsible tourism. You find that the stakeholders have got different interests, and it looks like it's difficult to reconcile their interests and focus on one thing, which is responsible tourism. So, like what Emmanuel said, where is the starting point if we are to promote responsible tourism in our destinations in Africa? Thank you.
I don't think Africa is any different from anywhere else in that respect. I don't think Africa is behind the pace. I think there's some great examples, and we've got, I think if I remember rightly, in our database of people who've won responsible tourism awards, Africa has about 210. The Indian subcontinent has around the same number. There are plenty of examples of good practice, but inevitably they are isolated. If you're looking at the destination level, it is much harder to find good examples where a whole destination is moving in that direction. Part of that is a consequence of that political question that I talked about in the lecture, which is, is your community, is your place, is your destination, is your city, is your national park going to use tourism, or is it going to accept that it's going to be used by tourism? That's the fundamental question that you need to ask. And having done that, you need to then, as a community, and this is where the local community being involved in decision making becomes so important, you need as a community to decide what it is that you want tourism to bring to your place. And then you need to work towards it. Now, the destination managers, I can probably be way more critical than you are of destination managers because I share your perspective. On the other hand, destination managers do as they're told. And it's the KPIs, the key performance indicators, the contracts which those destination marketers and those destination managers are given that determine what they do. So to give you an example, a really positive example, New Zealand, for about 8 years, actually told its marketing people what percentage of arrivals needed to go to different parts of New Zealand. And to some extent that delivered. It did improve the distribution of international visitors across New Zealand. But it is a matter of what the destination managers and marketeers are told to do. But your question also relates to the point I was making earlier, that in reality, it is the whole of the local authority and all the state agencies at the local level who need to work together. So it's the supply of potable water, it's the dealing with the sewage, it's the dealing with transport arrivals, it's the roads, it's where the bus stops are. You can go on and on and on, but it takes the whole of local government really to manage tourism, and too often it's just left to individuals in the tourism department who frankly don't have their hands on the levers that other departments of government at the local level have. So you need a whole of local government response. I'm very optimistic that Eswatini is on its way to becoming quite a significant responsible tourism destination, but we'll see what happens. Cape Town has got a lot of responsible tourism practices. There are great examples in Africa, but there aren't many great examples around the world. I'd say probably on balance, Africa has the same proportion as the rest of the world. It's a bit depressing, but we will make more progress at the destination level over time, I'm sure.
Thank you, Harold. I have put the
Debbie, can I
link
just
to
say it's been really frustrating having so many short answers to such big questions.
Well,
So
we can follow up with more information. I've put
yeah.
the Africa Searchable database on the chat, which will be accessible for people as well. And we will be sharing more information with people. Reza, would you like to say a few words?
Well, yeah, once again, yeah, it was a great event. So I just want to mention a few technical things. So the link that where you could register, the recording and all the PowerPoint and everything will be there. And you have opportunity also to ask questions there. If you go to that page, you will see it. You can ask a question. That link where also the recording will be available from tomorrow probably will be always available forever, so it will never expire. And you can always ask questions. Then it will go directly to Debbie and Harold.
And can I just say at the end of this that there's a lot of people on this call who I haven't seen. See, Marco, I don't recognise your photograph, but I recognise the name. There's a lot of people here I know, and if you would like to just drop me an email, that would be very nice.
And just a reminder, I think, Reza, if people want a certificate, they need to fill in the form that you've left on the chat.
That's right.
So please do that as well. It's been an absolute pleasure to meet everyone. We do have a second lecture in the series on the 7th of July, which will focus purely on rebalancing tourism and over-tourism. We hope many of you will join us. Follow us on LinkedIn, follow our Substack newsletters, drop us a line if you have any questions. It's great to share this information with you all, and we really thank you for taking the time to join us today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Debbie, and thank you, Harold. It was really great. So everything will be on our website. If there are any other questions, anybody want to talk, please unmute yourselves, say something, goodbye, hellos, anything. You're welcome to do.
Bye, everybody.
That's lovely. Thank you, Fandi.
Thank you. Goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye. Thank you very much.
Farewell.
Thank you
We
very
had-
much.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Bye-bye.
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 We had participants from over 60 countries, so that's really great.
Amazing.
You're very happy with it, Reza?
Yes, I am. I'm very happy with you and your presentation, actually. Okay.
It was
Yes.
interesting to see who was on the call.
Yeah.
UNWTO were there as well as UNET, Debbie.
That was a
Yes,
really
we're still
beautiful.
selling. Farewell. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I see many colleagues from UN Tourism and other, including Becca is here. Hello, Becca. Yeah, are you here? No, from UN Tourism? He's here, but okay. So thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you too. Institute of Tourism. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you and bye.
And thank you, Harold, for a wonderful presentation. Appreciate it.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Don't forget our next session, but of course you will automatically receive the link and everything as you are registered. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Harold. We can close now and I'll call separately.
Yeah, if you call straight away, Debbie, it'd be good.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.